Hey guys, welcome back to your channel, also known as professional fly hacker being petty for 10 to 20 minutes at a time. 2020 has brought us a new definition for the word market. It is now not only a place where you can trade in your money for goods and services, but also a place where you can trade in a bowl of delicious bat soup with 3 years of global lockdown. And since I'm yet in another one of these lockdowns, thanks to a market from far, far away, let's talk about the top 10 weirdest markets I have ever encountered while traveling around the world in the past half decade. However, a fair bit of warning, if you are uncomfortable with any of these concepts listed above me, your viewer discretion is advised. I hope you're ready because we're jumping right in with number 10 in Kazakhstan. Take a look at this market. It looks pretty normal, right? You have your floral section next to the pork and the chicken, and if you flip around, you're gonna find the dried fruit section. And if you go up a flight of stairs, you can have a delicious lunch for less than $2. Well, if you turn around the corner, you're gonna find out the largest wing in this market is actually horse meat. And wait, you, my hypothetical yet inquisitive viewer I created just for this seamless transition, might ask, wait, isn't Kazakhstan like the stand for horses? Well, you are not wrong. Everywhere in the country, you're gonna find traces of their symbol, horses. It ranges from the centerpiece in the National Museum in Astana, to the statue outside the National Museum in Astana, all the way to the road leading to the National Museum in Astana. The Kazakh national dish is the beshbermak, which is cooked using exclusively fatty horse meat. In fact, the respect for the animal does not translate into a dietary restriction in Kazakhstan, such as the cows for the Indians, bald eagle for Americans, or the dragons for the Chinese. Wait a minute. Yeah, come to think about it, if dragons do exist, we Chinese would probably still eat it. Perhaps steam it with some soy sauce. But 5 spices in a stew definitely sounds better though. As for the next item on the list, let's move all the way up north to the Arctic island of Svalbard, specifically its capital of Longyearbyen. It is one of the weirdest places that I have ever been to. While it deserves its own hidden gem episode, let me just give you a brief taste of how quirky this place is. You are not allowed to die there, and you are not allowed to be born there. While it is technically a part of Norway, citizens from over 50 countries, including the Chinese, are allowed to move there and live there and work there without any visa restriction. The reindeers just chill around the town without a single worry of the human beings inside. And in fact, they have no natural predators on the island, and they got so fat that every one of them can die from a heart attack just by a loud bang. And if you want to leave the civilization, you have to carry with yourself a double-barrel shotgun, because there is a denser cluttering of polar bears on the island than there are McDonald's in Omaha, Nebraska. And since it sits at 78 degrees north, it has the northernmost everything. The northernmost commercial airport, the northernmost Thai restaurant, the northernmost Toyota dealership, and of course, the northernmost supermarket. In fact, it is less like a supermarket, but more like an anorexic department store. You have your party supplies next to your school supplies, next to your adult magazines and cereal bars. That is due to the fact that this is the only place for anyone to get anything on the island without taking a 2-hour flight back to mainland. And surprisingly, most of the things are reasonably priced because they do not have a sales tax here. And this means this supermarket has the cheapest alcohol in the entire Norway because it does not have to pay the ridiculous sales tax of alcohol that sometimes can go up to 100%. However, anything that is perishable has to be flown in, and as you can expect, calling it expensive will be an understatement. Check out this tomato. The unit price is over $30 per kilogram, while anywhere else will probably sell it for about 10% of the price. So this supermarket definitely deserves its name because it is super expensive. For the next one, we have to go all the way to Africa. A few years ago, I was climbing Mount Kilimanjaro, and the first day left me with an impression in a very interesting market. This is the wheat market in Mount Kilimanjaro National Park. Due to a series of nasty incidents in the past, the government has issued a mandate that every porter can only carry at most 50 kilograms with him into the mountain, and it is strictly enforced at the entrance of the national park as every parcel is carefully weighted in order to make sure that they comply. And don't be fooled, the calculation is not that simple. Just to give you an example, for 2 people who need to head to the top of the mountain, they not only need to bring their own personal items, but also tents, sleeping bags, and most importantly, the food. And in order to cook the food, they would also need to bring pots, pans, utensils, and gas. And this needs to be carried by a porter, of course, who in turn himself would need sleeping bag, more food, as well as gas. Yeah, so it's quickly adding up, right? And not to mention, for every 4 tourists that need to head to the top, there needs to be a mountain guide who cannot carry anything himself. And lastly, if you reach a certain number threshold, you need to hire a professional full-time chef just to cook for everyone in the group. So you can see it is quickly turning into one of those high school math problems that simply make people quit and flip burgers at Wendy's for the rest of their lives. So it is very common to see a small group of mountain climbers with a busload of porters and guides in tow, and it is even more common to see people underestimating how many porters they would need. So there is always constant bartering and gathering of all kinds of porters. Some of them are overweight and some of them are underweight, and they are trying to trade with each other. And of course, if you need to hire a new porter, there's always one somewhere nearby waiting to join you on your adventure. To the Japanese, fish is almost as important as their weirdly designed consumer goods. They can't live one day without them. So it comes as no surprise that the fish market in Tokyo, the Tsukiji market, is the biggest in the entire world. However, what is less expected is that despite the worldwide fame of how organized the Japanese people are, the Tsukiji market is pure chaos. When I first stepped inside a few years ago, the first thing I noticed is how many boxes there were on the ground. They all stacked up to the roof against impossible odds, making walking around virtually impossible. And the second thing I noticed are the contents of these boxes. Inside them, you'll find things ranging from something as normal as crabs and squid, all the way to monstrosities with weird tentacles and strange shapes that crawled out of some forbidden manga section. And take a look of this tuna specialty store. What you see on the table is worth more than $10,000. This seemingly fishy market actually handled more than $14 million of transaction every single day, and some of the biggest tunas sold for more than $2 million each. And the cherry on top of this cake made of pure anarchy are these small motorized carts darting around everywhere. These skillful drivers can push these machines to their absolute limits, sometimes whooshing through aisles that is barely a meter wide at speeds over 50 kilometers per hour. And it is very common to see the feet of some tourists basically amputated by these carts. And perhaps the market is a little bit too chaotic for its own good. After a few electrical fires in 2017, the entire market was finally shut down by the authority in late 2018. And now this market of pure chaos remains only a memory in my head and on this list. For number 6, I'm not really sure it is a market or not, but it is so interesting that I have to include on this list. In late 2016, I was traveling in Thailand with my family. And on our way to the royal palace, we somehow ended up in this strange place that was some kind of marketplace. Except it is anything but a market, because we were the only people not wearing black, and the telltale sign of not a marketplace? Well, we were handed all kinds of things for absolutely free. I was confused while chowing down a free bowl of glass noodles accompanied by a dozen free rice balls, while holding a free umbrella that gifted to me by an old woman and a dozen free tissue paper. Well, it turns out that it is a place dedicated for those people waiting for their turn in order to enter the royal palace so that they can see their king for the one last time. In Thailand, the death of a king is not the biggest thing in the entire country, it is the thing in the entire country. Tens of thousands of people lined up outside the royal palace just to see the king one last time, while hundreds of monks were chanting 24/7 just outside the Great Hall. The city government forced places such as nightclubs and bars to close for a full year out of the respect for the king. Can you possibly imagine the government forcing certain sectors of the economy to completely shut down for a full year because of something that they cannot control? Oh, wait. There are a lot of red light districts all around the world. However, none of them can come even close to Herbertstrasse in Hamburg, Germany. This is because they not only have some of the most expensive girls in the entire country, but also because of their notorious ban on female visitors. And that's why in this photo that I took when I was curious enough to visit it, all of the girls were waiting outside just for their guy friends or perhaps boyfriends, because Germany is a pretty open country, to finish checking out the goods inside. Once I stepped inside the metal barricades, I found myself in a strange marketplace of sorts, except the only goods on sale are girls displaying their own body. They have these special cases that showcase their entire bodies, and they can open the windows just to yell at you. And they can go from 3 layers tall all the way to 5 layers tall. So imagine standing in a huge grocery aisle in the supermarket, except every box of cereal is constantly yelling at you in order for you to buy them. And all of them are backlit by this strange neon light of sorts. So it looks almost futuristic and, dare I say, cyberpunky. And it was truly a magnificent sight in this chaotic red light district. And if you are one of the girls who are unfortunate or perhaps daunting enough to end up in this street, despite its explicit warnings outside, well, then you will find yourself subjected to a lot of verbal abuse. And some of the girls will even douse you with this special penis water that the customers use to wash themselves before engaging in the business. So yes, in this marketplace, it is not only a place where the goods can yell back at you, but also a place where the goods can physically attack you. And the largest market I have ever been to must be the Souk in Marrakesh, Morocco. It starts at the center square Jami El Fanneh and spreads out to every single corner of the old city. I reckon it is at least 20 blocks by 20 blocks wide, even though there is absolutely no organization once you enter the market. The entire scene is roughly divided into sections, starting with all the food stalls on the main square. These little establishments cook up things as tame as something like a barbecue, all the way to monstrosities such as these goat heads with their brains on full display. And once you move through the tapestries and little clay tunnels, you are gonna soon find out this souk is not for the faint-hearted. There's a section where hundreds of dried fruit stalls lined up around the block. And around these people who are handling these fruits, gravity seems to be a mere suggestion. And then you move to the pottery square, where hundreds of thousands of pots, painted in all kinds of colors as well as patterns, will mesmerize you until you pass out. And then you have your leather workshops, where there's always this miasma of treated leather, so thick that the air around it was not permeable to light. And yet the most amazing section is dedicated to illumination. These intricately carved lights brings in a mystical feel, harkens back to the golden age of the Arab world, transporting you across time and space. And yet most of the store owners are quite lazy, just napping on the drapes waiting for another hot afternoon to pass by. But they are very receptive of my pets, so I will give them a pass. And what I showed you are merely glimpses of the magnificent Marrakesh souk. I spent days walking around this Middle Eastern maze and did not come across one single scene that was a repetition of something I have already seen. There's always some kind of jewelry store, a tapestry tavern, just hiding beyond that corner. And I truly cannot find another place to put this beautiful market except near the top of this list. If you have watched my weird food episode, then you should know what is coming up next. There is no way I can make this list without the insane wet market in Iquitos, Peru. And when I say it is a wet market, I mean it is truly a wet market. Since Amazon River's flow is as irregular as my sleeping schedule, sometimes the market will be partially flooded and there will be special boats to transport you back and forth. And besides the muddy roads covered with tons of trash, you're gonna find out this market is for the truly adventurous type. Forget about sanitation or health standard. If you are hungry, just go get some food at a local stall, next to a butcher dissecting an animal caught just this morning. And if you ask him what it is, he will usually be as confused as you are. And if you go one stall over, you're gonna find a lady doing an all-you-can-eat Brazilian nuts buffet. And then you can have your fill of grilled Cayman crocodiles. Or perhaps just a few steps down, there is probably a counterfeit DVD for every single movie that you will ever need to watch. And there's truly no way for one to grasp the scale and absolute chaos that is going on in this market without being there himself. And I will be surprised if the next pandemic does not start from somewhere like this, merely a few kilometers from the deepest of the Amazon jungle, but filled with all kinds of fresh wild game meat in close contact of every single kind of human activity. So before the zombie apocalypse truly wipes us all out, why don't you take a chance and walk down these streets for one more time? Take a bite of the star of our weird food episode, the cocotero, and watch their brothers and sisters slither and writhe in the plastic box. And why not spend your pocket change on some bananas? And yes, this is how many bananas you can buy for $2 here in Iquitos. If you're feeling something juicy, how about this kind of fruit shaped like a dragon's egg? And perhaps some grilled monkey as a protein source? In China, it is very common for parents to take care of, or perhaps take over, their children's marriage issue. And they really want their children's partners to basically match in every single regard. For example, it goes from something as superstitious as the Chinese zodiac sign or the birth time, all the way up to the education, income, and property rights. What? They need to like each other? It's not a thing in China, you know. If they don't like each other, they will learn to like each other. Due to the rapid recent urbanization in Chinese cities, it is getting increasingly difficult for the Chinese elders to connect with each other. However, the ingenious people have come up with a solution. Every Sunday in my hometown Shanghai, a gigantic marriage market will pop out of thin air like clockwork in one of the largest parks downtown. All of the parents will rush in with their gigantic umbrellas and then slap their demands as well as their children's profiles onto those umbrellas like a near bankrupt supermarket, sticking those for sale stickers on the milk jars that are 3 days over expiration. And for a lot of folks who are not familiar with the Chinese culture, some of these demands can be absolutely bonkers. Let's take a look at an example. Here is a typical profile that you can find in the market. The first thing that you'll probably notice is that the parents are trying to make sure everyone understands it is a Shanghainese only place, as it is a Shanghainese guy seeking a Shanghainese girl. This is because a lot of the elders in Shanghai are quite xenophobic. And in fact, in Shanghainese, there's a derogative term just for referring to out-of-towners. It is called ngangbu, which literally translates to hard drives. And the reasoning behind it is because the hard drives only take up space. And then comes the most important as well as practical part. This guy has a house in downtown Shanghai, and it can be used for the newly formed family. This is extremely important because a lot of girls do not want to marry into a family where the guy does not have a house. So she has to move in with her parents, which is actually very common in China. This is because the prices of real estate in Shanghai has gone higher than Elon Musk when he came up with the idea to reuse rockets. And for this house, which is situated in the inner ring and is barely enough to fit a small family, it is worth about $1 million. This will take a typical white-collar 40 years of working without any expenditure in order to afford it. And in fact, this guy is probably on the lower end of the spectrum because his parents have expressed their frustration for not being able to meet the girl's demands, as this house is probably a bit too small. And yet the madness does not stop just there. This is just a regular section of the market, as there are other corners dedicated to more special requirements. For example, for the Chinese, a lot of them believe that it is a huge status boost if you can get out of the country. So here is a corner dedicated to the foreign market. We have quite a few fellow Canadians here, and there is a Californian guy, a few Hong Kongese, and a bit of others. And their requirements are definitely a bit higher than those regular folks. In fact, a Hungarian girl made the national news just by appearing in this corner a few years ago, trying to promote herself as a public stunt. So it is pretty apparent that the Chinese fascination of the outside world is absolutely unstoppable. As you can see, the bar is set extremely high. And yet, sadly, a lot of these children probably have not given their parents the consent to use the information this way, let alone selling out their entire lives for a marriage proposal. But perhaps this marriage market does not exist to satisfy the need for the younger folks to come together and form families, but it is a place for the older folks to come together and satisfy their need for a tradition as well as a future. Whenever there's a demand, there will be a supply. That is how our market works. And perhaps this one might be just one of the weirdest, yet the most understandable ones yet. Before I reveal the number one pick, let's go check out some of the honorable mentions. Such as this incredibly modern and well-decorated supermarket in Lusaka, the capital of Zambia, situated in a mall where literally steps away people are begging for food so they do not starve to death. and the central market of Hakodate, Japan, where you can spend a few bucks to go fish yourself a squid, the city's famous and proud symbol, and they will cook it up for you for absolutely free if you manage to catch one of these sneaky bastards. And lastly, how about this hyper-touristic farmers market in Bergen, Norway, where they accept just about every single kind of currency and a single plate of seafood will cost more than 100 US dollars. Well, we have finally reached the weirdest market in the entire world. And for that, we have to travel all the way down south to South America, specifically La Paz, Bolivia. In a place where ladies' fashion is English bowler hats and a carpet on the shoulder, the tradition rules supreme. Here is the Witchdoctor Street. Each house contains an old practitioner of these forbidden mountain magic who can help you with anything, as long as you bring the appropriate payment and the corresponding sacrifice. And to obtain that, you have to go to the other side of the city and purchase the ingredients at the infamous witchcraft market. Here you can buy useful things ranging from red wine to dried sea stars, clay tablets with runes, or amateurishly decorated candies. And here is the formula to tell your fortune: dead worms, sea star legs, dried nuts and beans, and the feather of a condor. And yet, the most notorious and perhaps the most popular item in the market is something dedicated for a new business. The corpse of a young llama should be buried at the corner of the foundation before the construction of a new business, under the supervision of a witch doctor to ensure the best prayer to the mountain goddess, Pachamama. For only that will she grant you a prosperous venture and perhaps years of steady income. And the younger the unfortunate animal is, the better the results will be. So a lot of shop owners proudly proclaim that these are just newborn babies, not old enough to even stand, but some of them go even further, proclaiming that their products are straight from the source, ripped from a dying mother's belly still warm enough to preserve its shape. Something that is not yet alive but not dead, trapped between life and death, a perfect communication tool between this mortal realm and the heavenly spheres. But to me, an onlooker, this is not the body of an animal, less a valuable object, but an abominable soul trapped in a limbo of pain and agony. With its contorted husk still fresh in my mind, there is no doubt this is the weirdest market of them all. Well, these are the 10 weirdest markets I have ever encountered while traveling around the world. Which one of these strikes you as particularly fascinating? Let me know in the comment section down below. Well, as for me, when I inevitably get put onto the Chinese marriage market by one of my concerned aunts when I turn 30, I just really wish that she does not write me as something like a jobless drifter who claims to be a travel vlogger, but instead something good like an aspirational YouTube star who lives all around the world. And you can help me with that by clicking the like button beneath me as well as the subscribe button if you want to see more travel related content like this one. It would really help me out with my chances, I'm pretty sure of that. Well, I hope you enjoyed this video and I'll see you around.